The snow lay silent across the tundra, a white ocean under a gray, breathless sky. Beneath that stillness, something invisible moved. Distortions shimmered in the frozen air, brief ripples of light like heat mirages in the cold. The Xy'kath warriors advanced, each one cloaked in refractive armor that bent the spectrum around their scaled forms. 6 of them, moving in perfect unison, their steps leaving no prints. They were hunters born on a world of dense jungles and ultraviolet light, now crawling across an alien planet they believed beneath them. Earth was supposed to be finished, its resistance shattered, its defenses primitive. But one anomaly remained, a human signal pulsing through the electromagnetic noise, a whisper in the dark that had killed too many of their kind. Commander Karnthal halted. He raised one taloned hand, signaling silence. Through his visor, thermal readings glimmered faintly ahead. The source of interference was close. He could feel the static hum of human machinery buried beneath the snow. The target's beacon lies within 50 meters, he hissed in his native tongue, a sound like sand against glass. Erase it. The squad spread out in a practiced arc. They believed themselves unseen, ghosts under a new sun. They did not know that the ghosts already belonged to Earth. From a ridge overlooking the valley, Captain Elias Ward watched the distortions crawl closer through his scope. He lay prone beneath a net of frost, his rifle buried in the snow beside him. The barrel protruded only by an inch, its matte surface coated in white resin to scatter heat. Through his visor, he tracked the faint warps of light that betrayed movement, imperfections no machine could calibrate away. His breath came slow and shallow, heartbeat steady at 42 beats per minute. No movement except the slow tightening of his gloved finger against the trigger. Elias had been out here for 6 days alone. He had slept less than 6 hours total, eating in silence while the storm came and went. Somewhere above the clouds, the Xy'kath fleet still orbited, their bombardments turning cities into dust. But the northern wastes were different, too cold, too empty to matter. That was what made it the perfect place to fight back. Command had sent him here to neutralize a relay team. He stayed because they had killed his unit. He shifted the rifle's focus, the display flickering with data. Range, 630 meters. Wind speed, 20 knots east. Temperature, minus 31 Celsius. The target field was open for 2 seconds at a time before the distortion bent light away. That was enough. He exhaled, the sound fading into the snow. One of the distortions stumbled slightly as it crossed a patch of uneven ice. A small flicker in the refractive field. Elias's finger moved. The rifle cracked once, an electric roar swallowed by the wind. A blue shimmer erupted in the air, and the outline of a body appeared, writhing as invisible armor failed. The alien collapsed face first into the snow, its cloak shorting out, revealing black chitin streaked with luminescent veins. The others froze. Karnthal hissed a command, his voice sharp with disbelief. Visual breach. Source unknown. The warriors formed a perimeter, cloaks rippling as they tried to reset their optical fields. But the air itself betrayed them. Elias fired again, and another distortion dropped, twitching violently before fading to stillness. Through the chaos, Karnthal scanned the ridgeline. Nothing. Only endless white and wind. Impossible, he muttered. No primitive weapon could pierce our phase veil. Yet 2 of his soldiers lay dead. He forced composure, adjusting his internal optics to track magnetic anomalies. There, an anomaly pulsed faintly, a whisper of electromagnetic disturbance among the snowdrifts. He motioned silently toward it, signaling a flanking pattern. His pride demanded a kill. Elias watched them split formation. He could almost hear his old instructor's voice. They never learn. Fear breaks formation faster than bullets. His left hand adjusted the rifle's secondary coil. The scope realigned with surgical precision. He waited until one distortion drew near a frozen spruce at the base of the ridge. The creature crouched, scanning with a handheld sensor that hummed faintly. Elias fired again. The alien's device exploded in its hands, sending shrapnel of ice and metal into the snow. A hiss of agony echoed through the valley. The last three broke discipline, scattering for cover. He shifted his aim to the largest heat signature, Karnthal himself. But the commander had already vanished into the storm, his cloak recalibrating to pure infrared invisibility. The scope's filter couldn't see it. Elias paused, recalculated, then lowered the rifle slightly. His instinct told him the commander wasn't fleeing. He was circling, smart enough to learn mid-fight. That made him dangerous. For a long minute, the snowstorm swallowed every sound. Only the low hum of his rifle filled Elias's helmet. He adjusted position, inching backward through the snow until he was under the cover of an outcropping. Movement sensors ticked faintly, something behind him. He froze. A ripple of air shimmered at his flank, too close. Elias spun, pulling a sidearm from his thigh holster. The distortion lunged, claws slicing through his cloak. He fired point blank, the bullet punching through its chest. It fell twitching, invisible one moment and horribly solid the next. Elias steadied his breath, pulse spiking, then fading back to calm. The rifle hummed quietly beside him, barrel steaming in the cold. Through his visor feed, he saw the remaining signals retreating. The alien leader was pulling back, dragging the wounded behind him. They were no longer hunters. They were prey. Elias toggled his comm recorder, voice steady but low. 3 confirmed. Others retreating south. They'll be back with sensors next time. He paused, glancing at the motionless bodies half buried in snow. But so will I. He adjusted his scope once more, scanning the blizzard until the distortions vanished completely into white. Then he exhaled, letting the tension slip from his muscles. Somewhere beyond the horizon, thunder rolled, perhaps another bombardment, perhaps the storm growing teeth. Either way, the game had just begun. He checked his rifle's energy cell, chambered a fresh round, and lay back into the snow. The wind howled again, erasing footprints and blood alike, leaving nothing to mark the fight but silence. Elias smiled faintly behind his visor. "You're not invisible," he whispered to the empty sky. "Not to me." The storm worsened overnight, wind carving sharp ridges into the frozen valley. Elias woke before dawn, though he had not truly slept. His visor displayed only static. The blizzard was scattering the drone signals he'd set for early warning. Good. That meant the Xy'kath couldn't see either. He took a slow breath, watching the condensation fade against the inside of his mask. 3 kills. 3 still breathing. They'd regroup, adapt, and come for him again. They always did. He rechecked the rifle's magnetic coil, brushing away frost from the barrel with mechanical care. The routine steadied him, something simple in a world that had lost all sense of order. When the weapon hummed softly, alive again, he whispered, "One more day." Below, through layers of wind and snow, Karnthal crouched beside the body of one of his fallen. The corpse steamed faintly, heat leaking through fractured armor. He pressed a clawed hand to the wound, then withdrew it, the blood freezing almost instantly. Around him, the remaining warriors watched in silence, their cloaks flickering with residual distortion. "He hunts us," Karnthal growled. "He reads the cold like a book." The others shifted uneasily. One muttered something about phase instability and human tricks. Karnthal ignored him. Pride burned in his chest, but beneath it was something unfamiliar, a trace of fear. He had fought plasma storms, parasites, and the void itself, but this single human on a dead world had already rewritten everything he knew about war. "We adapt," he ordered, forcing conviction into the words. "He bleeds like we do." Elias scanned from the ridge, noting their formation changes. They were faster now, moving in tighter clusters, scanning every rock and drift. They'd learned caution. Good. Fear was a weapon, and he knew how to use it. He shifted to a new position 200 meters east, dragging his gear through the snow to mask his previous nest. Every sound mattered. The crunch of ice, the scrape of metal. His heart thrummed in his ears, but his movements were exact, rehearsed, patient. He had lived long enough in this wasteland to understand that survival wasn't about strength, It was about rhythm. Move when the wind moves. Fire when the silence ends. He reached a shallow hollow beneath a fallen pine. Through his scope, faint distortions shimmered again. 3 shapes advancing while a 4th hung back. The commander, perhaps. Elias didn't fire. Not yet. Instead, he activated a beacon half buried in the snow 50 meters away. A decoy pulse flickered, mimicking a weapon's electromagnetic signature. The aliens turned sharply, drawn toward it like sharks to blood. The trap was set. When the first one approached the beacon, Elias detonated the charge. A flash of blue light tore through the storm, scattering shards of armor across the ice. One warrior fell instantly, body convulsing before the cloak collapsed entirely. The others screamed in their own distorted frequency, the sound sharp enough to make Elias's helmet sensor spike. He rolled to a new angle and fired twice, once through the chest of a second target, once through the leg of another. Snow exploded in a plume of vapor. The air filled with static and fury. Karnthal dove behind a ridge, his own cloak sputtering. "Fall back," he commanded, voice heavy with rage. He anticipates every move. His mind raced, analyzing. The human had lured them, understood their reaction times, exploited their reliance on scanners. He was fighting like no soldier Karnthal had faced, more predator than man. The commander pressed a hand to the snow, activating his last resort, a pulse emitter designed to disrupt low-frequency optics. The surrounding white glowed faintly violet. "Let us see him bleed," he snarled. Elias's visor flared as the pulse hit, washing his vision in static. He cursed softly, ripping off the digital overlay and switching to analog scope mode. The world became raw again, stripped of numbers and data. Just his eyes in the storm. He adjusted focus manually, finding movement through instinct rather than sensors. A ripple of snow at the base of a tree. A reflection, too sharp to be ice. He fired once, then again. A cry followed, cut short. The emitter flickered and died. The storm reclaimed its silence. He breathed hard, adrenaline finally burning through his calm exterior. His knuckles ached where he gripped the rifle. For a moment, he imagined his old squad. The laughter in the barracks, the sound of human voices that weren't drowned in static or gunfire. They died on the second day of the invasion. He hadn't said a word as they fell, just kept shooting. He still didn't know if that made him brave or broken. Movement returned at the edge of his vision. One distortion, larger, steadier, approached low and fast. Karnthal himself, weapon drawn, plasma core flickering. Elias didn't move. The alien's cloak sputtered, briefly revealing glinting armor and 4 luminous eyes. They locked onto each other for a fraction of a second, hunter to hunter. Karnthal raised his weapon, and Elias dove sideways, rolling through the snow as a beam scorched the ground where he'd been. He came up on one knee, rifle steady, and fired through the blur. The round struck the alien's shoulder, spinning him backward. But before Elias could finish it, the commander vanished again, dissolving into the storm. He waited, breathing shallowly. The landscape seemed empty once more, except for the faint hum of cooling metal and the hiss of wind. The battle had lasted less than 2 minutes, but the valley now lay littered with wreckage, fragments of armor half buried in the drifts. Elias checked his ammunition. 3 rounds left in the primary magazine. Enough. He retrieved one of the alien corpses, dragging it beside a rock outcrop for cover. Up close, the creature looked both fragile and terrifying, its translucent skin webbed with bioluminescent veins. He stared for a moment, not in hatred, but in quiet understanding. Whatever they were, they had believed they couldn't lose. That belief had died here. Night began to fall again, darkness seeping through the clouds like ink. Elias sealed the beacon logs and sent a burst transmission on a dead frequency. Maybe command would hear. Maybe no one would. It didn't matter. Above, faint lights pulsed through the sky, dropships preparing for another descent. The next wave. He reloaded slowly, eyes never leaving the horizon. Somewhere out there, the commander would be waiting, wounded but alive. Elias smiled faintly behind the frost of his visor. "Round 2, he whispered. Then he lay flat once more, body vanishing into the snow as the storm rose to cover all trace of life. The world had turned to silence again by dawn. The storm had passed, leaving behind a crystalline wasteland that glittered faintly under a pale, indifferent sun. Elias crouched at the ridge's edge, scanning the horizon. The alien bodies he had left the night before were gone, dragged away in the night. Only grooves in the snow remained, long trails that led east toward the valley floor. They were regrouping again. He knew what that meant. Carnthal wasn't finished. Wounded, humiliated, desperate perhaps, but not defeated. That kind of pride didn't die quietly. Elias exhaled, his breath forming a thin mist that drifted away like smoke. "Come find me," then he murmured. Down below, Carnthal leaned against a shattered rock, his right arm bound in a tourniquet of metallic thread. Pain flared every time he moved, but he refused to acknowledge it. Around him, only one warrior remained, a younger fighter with a cloak barely functioning. The others were dead, their remains vaporized or scattered across the tundra. He had underestimated the human. It wasn't weakness that kept them alive. It was defiance, a kind of madness he couldn't understand. "We end this," he rasped. The warrior hesitated, uncertain. Carnthal's eyes glowed brighter. "He will not leave this world alive." Elias moved through the snow with practiced stillness, each step deliberate. The cold gnawed at his joints, the air so dry it burned his throat. His suit's heating core had begun to falter, but he ignored the warning indicators blinking across his visor. Pain reminded him he was still alive. His HUD flickered, catching faint traces of heat near the valley floor. They were coming. He adjusted his rifle, double-checked the rail alignment, and positioned himself behind a half-frozen ridge that overlooked the only path left through the terrain. If Carnthal wanted to end this, he'd have to walk into Elias's world, one built of ice, distance, and patience. The first sign came as a shimmer along the ridgeline, faint distortions bending the sunlight. He could almost admire the precision of it, how their technology fought against nature's simplicity. He whispered under his breath, "Visibility's your curse." Then he waited. The alien pair advanced, scanning slowly, every movement deliberate. Elias counted the rhythm between their steps. 6 seconds, pause, scan, 6 seconds again. Carnthal was slower now, wounded but steady. The younger warrior ranged ahead, cloak flickering under the stress of cold interference. Elias tracked him through the scope, aligned the crosshairs, and squeezed the trigger. The railgun cracked like thunder. The front runner vanished in a burst of blue mist, body disintegrating before it hit the ground. Carnthal froze, eyes narrowing beneath his mask. He dropped to one knee, scanning wildly. "Show yourself, coward!" The shout echoed across the valley, distorted by the cold air. Elias didn't move. He watched through the scope as Carnthal ripped off the failing cloak and stood exposed, armor glinting in the light. It was a challenge, raw and deliberate. Elias's finger hesitated on the trigger. He could end it now, one perfect shot to the skull. But something in the commander's stance stopped him. It wasn't surrender. It was resolve, the same kind that had driven him to keep fighting long after reason said stop. Elias lowered the rifle slightly, repositioning for a cleaner angle. Carnthal began to advance uphill, weapon drawn, each step sending small avalanches tumbling down. He felt his heart quicken, the rhythm measured and precise. When Carnthal reached the halfway point, Elias fired again. The shot clipped the alien's shoulder, spinning him sideways, but he didn't fall. He roared and fired back, a blast of plasma scorching the rocks inches from Elias's face. Heat seared through his visor, and he rolled, shifting to a new position behind an outcrop. The alien's approach was relentless now, every step a declaration. "Come on," Elias muttered, voice low. "Show me what you've got." Carnthal reached the top of the rise, breathing hard. His armor was cracked, one lens shattered, steam rising from the wound in his chest. He spotted the glint of metal half buried ahead and fired instinctively. The shot tore through snow and silence, but hit nothing. Elias was already behind him, moving like shadow, rifle in hand but no longer raised. The distance between them closed with agonizing slowness. Carnthal turned, raising his weapon, but Elias was faster. The butt of the rifle struck the alien's jaw, sending him sprawling. The plasma gun fell into the snow, hissing faintly as it cooled. They faced each other in the storm's aftermath, two remnants of dying wars, neither willing to yield. Carnthal lunged with a blade drawn from his armor, its edge glowing faintly blue. Elias sidestepped, the motion instinctive, and drove a knife upward beneath the alien's ribs. The creature staggered, claws scrabbling for balance. "You can't kill what's already broken," Elias said quietly. He twisted the blade once, cleanly, and stepped back. Carnthal collapsed into the snow, his cloak flickering one last time before dying completely. For a long moment, Elias just stood there, chest heaving, eyes unfocused. The wind swept across the valley, whispering through shattered metal and fractured armor. Slowly, he knelt beside the alien and removed his helmet. Beneath it, the creature's features were strangely human, angular, weary, eyes burning with something close to understanding. Elias closed them gently before rising again. Above, the sound of engines rumbled faintly through the sky. Dropships, heavy and distant. Reinforcements or scavengers, he couldn't tell. It didn't matter anymore. The mission was done. The relay would stay down. He slung his rifle across his back and turned toward the ridge, his silhouette merging with the endless white. Every movement hurt now. The cold had settled into his bones, but he welcomed it. Pain meant purpose. He reached the crest and looked back once more. The battlefield was nothing but silence and snow, the traces of war already fading. The wind would erase everything soon, footprints, blood, even the dead. Only the memory would remain, if anyone lived to remember it. Elias adjusted the comm on his wrist and recorded a final log, his voice steady despite the exhaustion. Target neutralized. Mission complete. If anyone hears this, Earth still stands. He shut the transmitter off and let the silence reclaim him. The sky burned faintly orange as the sun broke through the clouds for the first time in days. It painted the snow with light that felt almost warm. Elias smiled beneath his frostbitten mask, then began walking toward the horizon, leaving no trace but the whisper of boots against ice. Somewhere behind him, the storm began to rise again, swallowing the valley whole.